When I was a couple weeks short of my 70th birthday, I started thinking about my mother's mother, who lived to be 100, and her mother, who lived to be 102, and my father, who lived to be 90. I began to think that maybe our generation could be the first to routinely live to be 100. When I talked about this at family dinner one night, my granddaughter, who was 5, said,
"What are you going to do for the next 30 years, Grandpa?"
Hello, I'm Dr. Janet Price.
And I'm Gregg Kaloust. And we are Oldish. And this is our podcast, Oldish.
If you're oldish or know someone who is, please join us every week for conversations amongst ourselves
And our special guests
about what it means to be oldish in the 21st century.
If you ever wonder whether you're getting old, you're oldish. What are you going to do for the next 30 minutes? Hi, I'm Greg, and I'm oldish.
Hi, I'm Janet, and I'm oldish. Welcome to this episode of our podcast, Oldish, Conversations on Aging in the 21st Century. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Janet. How are you?
I'm okay. Happy Memorial Day.
Happy Memorial Day to you, too. Yeah, it seems funny to say Happy Memorial Day, but there it is. That's kind of how it's morphed a little bit. It's supposed to be a solemn day of remembrance of people who have died, giving us our freedoms. But it's kind of morphed into a Happy Memorial Day and the beginning of summer and let's have a party and all of that, just like all the other holidays have been co-opted by commercialism and consumerism.
Well, you've captured everything right there in the beginning, just the whole what is Memorial Day and what are we celebrating? Is celebrating even the right word? What are we commemorating, honoring? And just a brief history of Memorial Day, that it is a federal holiday, and it became a federal holiday in 1971. So not that long ago, really. Well, maybe it's long. It doesn't seem long because of being oldish. It started in 1868 by a General John A. Logan, who was a leader of a Union veterans organization, and he decided to call for a nationwide day of remembrance for those who had died in the Civil War. And at that time, they called it Decoration Day. And it was called that until at some point, close to 1971, it was decided that this holiday needs to be inclusive of all people who fought in wars for the United States, not just people in the Civil War. So that's when it changed from Decoration Day to Memorial Day.
Was it Decoration Day because people went and decorated graves?
Yes, that's right. Flowers were placed on the graves of Union and Confederate soldiers at the Arlington National Cemetery. So that's where it started. Yeah. And since then, we've evolved, morphed, changed, some of us, in how we think of Memorial Day. Some people still use this holiday to visit the graves of any family member who's died, and then especially those who were involved with the war. Others probably don't think about it at all from that perspective and think of it more as it's a federal holiday, it's a day off, let's go shopping, let's make avail of all the sales, or let's just take a day off, which nothing that I'm saying I consider to be bad or good. It's just noting how things have changed over time.
One of the things of oldishness that has to do with this at this point is I have been spending a lot of time, as you know, in my family home where I grew up, because I'm the last one in my family, and it's time for me to take it apart. And Memorial Day there for us was a very big deal. Everybody that my parents knew was affected by World War II. All of their friends were former military. All of their relatives fought somewhere. My father was a veteran, and the parade went right past our house. We lived a half a mile from the cemetery on one of the larger routes in town, and the parade went right past our house every Memorial Day, and it was a big deal. We had to dress up for Memorial Day. It was definitely a day to pay our respects to the people who had fallen, specifically, I think, in World War II. I don't think my parents thought much about people who had died in World War I or Korea even though my father was in the service during the Korean War, and at least one of his brothers was. But it was a big deal. And we would walk as the parade would go by. We'd gather onto the back of the parade and we'd walk the half a mile down to the cemetery, and there would be a gathering in the cemetery, and soldiers would come with their guns, and there'd be a 21 gun salute or however many guns they had. And, speeches and prayers and all of that kind of stuff. And the graves would be decorated. And what triggered this in my head just now is I've been spending a lot of time there, and I've been spending time in the cemetery because it's a handy place to walk, for one thing, and that's where my parents are buried. And I was supposed to, I'm not there this weekend, elsewhere, and I was supposed to, before I left there, I had promised myself that I would go put flowers and flags on my parents' grave. And because I'm oldish, I totally spaced it until just this very minute. So I will forgive myself. Not sure that they will, but I have visited their graves and made sure that it was cleaned off. And I put flowers. Actually, they were silk flowers because not supposed to have real flowers there that in the spring. But I put silk flowers on the grave on Mother's Day, so I thought that was pretty good. So I guess maybe I'll get a pass for Memorial Day.
Well, I hope so. I mean, they're not going anywhere. And so when you get back to the area and you maybe do that then, that seems pretty good.
Yeah, I'll do it then. Time passes more slowly in heaven.
Yes.
So they won't have noticed yet.
Yeah. So you are describing a very, I don't know if serious is the right word, but very kind of formal, serious celebration and ritual and tradition in your town and your family. Mm-hmm. I remember Memorial Day being about picnics and parades. And when I was an older child, maybe middle school, high school, being able to play in bands that were marching with the parade. And that was really fun. I feel some sadness about how the holiday is honoring people who fought in the war and died, but there is some discrepancy about who we're honoring based on race and culture. And we know, looking back, that even during World War II and each of the wars we've been in, depending on what color your skin was or what culture you were from, you were treated a certain way in either in the army, for example, military, or not allowed, or allowed to fight, but segregated. So I think sometimes holidays like this can bring up those wounds, both past and present, and physical and emotional wounds. When I think about the Japanese and how they were interred in California during World War II and after. And so there's a lot of complexity to the holiday.
Yes. And there's a lot of patriotism, in quotes, around the holiday. And I think patriotism has changed. But when you were talking about the different cultures, I was thinking also there were people on various sides of the different wars, and they all suffered too. Maybe we can throw some thoughts their way on a holiday like this, because their families and as we know, most of those wars weren't a war of choice for many of the people. Many people who went and fought and died because they were told to, not because the war had any meaning for them. I'm not saying that about World War I or World War II, maybe. The Civil War certainly wasn't. People in the North, where I'm from, that was a chosen war for the sake of other people. It wasn't the South is invading us. Actually, now that I think of it, we didn't get involved in World War II until we were attacked, even though there were horrible things being done in Europe with Hitler and the Jews and the other groups that the Nazis persecuted. And also the Japanese military wasn't being very kind over in the Pacific to people either. We didn't join the war to protect the Jews or to protect the Chinese. We joined the war because we were attacked. There's other stuff going on in the background there, but there was that. So anyway, I vote for this Memorial Day, remembering all the people who have ever died in any war. And maybe this would be a good time to make a commitment to cut that stuff out. What do we keep doing that for? It's so stupid. And everybody agrees that it's stupid. But we keep doing it anyway.
Yeah, I was just thinking that I haven't been following the news, so I don't know if this is being talked about, but the idea that this is a moment where we could all stop and say, let's think about how we're doing this and how we could do this differently. Now, at this point, we're at a place where we went from what was considered by many to be a noble war or a war to save humanity to now not even knowing if we're using the word war and what, as our country, what we're doing, is it war and why? And so it almost feels like this Memorial Day in 2026 is a call to reevaluate what are we doing as a country and what do we want to be doing in the service of getting along as a world community. And it doesn't mean that that's not hard or that there's not lots of really serious problems, but I'd like to believe that this war isn't something we jump into very quickly or without much thought and also, what is it for? Is it for greed? Is it for greed?
Greed or ego or distraction or something. This is the first war that I can remember ever hearing of that there wasn't a lead up to the war that provided lots of justification for that war. Even thinking about the invasion of Iraq, there was lots of lead up to that, and the government made a huge attempt to convince everybody that it was a good idea and that it was our patriotic duty and that Saddam Hussein was a danger to our country specifically and to the world. And it was 100% made up, but at least they made an attempt. So this war that we're looking at this week, and I don't even want to call it a war, whatever this adventure is or this stupidity is, there wasn't even any attempt in advance, and to the point where everybody in the administration that you asked gave you a different story. It was about keeping them from getting a nuke. No, it wasn't. It was about Israel. No, it wasn't. It was about this other thing. And now it's about stuff that didn't exist. Oh, we have to go to war against Iran to open up the Strait of Hormuz. Well, the Strait of Hormuz was opened up before we attacked Iran. So anyway, I don't want to go too far down that one. But we were talking before we started to record about change in culture and how one of the things that's different about wars, I think largely since World War, I don't remember the Korean War very well, so I don't know what the hardships were like, but it seemed like it was a national effort. Previous wars were a national effort where everybody got involved and there were war bonds and things were rationed here in the States and there was food rationing and gasoline rationing and everybody knew somebody who put on a uniform and went off to fight. And the culture changed hard in World War II, where we've become an industrialized nation and mostly men went off to World War II. But it was because it was a large industrial war. Somebody had to stay behind and make the uniforms and make the bombs and make the guns and make the bullets and make all of that stuff. And that fell to women largely and people who had been marginalized otherwise, different cultures and so on and so forth. And that made a big change, I think, in good ways and bad ways, but it made a big change in women in the workforce, for example. Men, when the war was over, tried to shift it back again, but that one was, it was a thing in World War I. How are you going to get them back on the farm once they've seen Paris? So it's kind of like that a little bit. Once women had some ability to go to work and do the work that men had done, and even though they weren't paid as much as men might have been, that shifted things a little bit. But in honor of my family in World War II, I just want to tell a quick story.
Okay.
I might have told you this story before, but I don't think I've told it on the podcast before. Is that during World War II, there were 6 Kaloust boys in my father's family. There were 6 boys and a girl in the family. And my father and my uncles, all but one, were in the service during World War II in different branches of the service. They each picked a different, I don't know why they did this, but they were each in a different branch of the service. What might have been the hardest one was I had an uncle who was 6'4", weighed about 220 pounds, and he was the strongest and the toughest one of the bunch, but he couldn't ride in a car. He couldn't ride in a vehicle. He would get car sick, puke all over everybody. And so he was 4-H, and he was stuck walking in the streets back home, being this big hulking guy, and it was really hard on him psychologically. I don't think he ever got over it. But anyway, the story that I wanted to tell related to the changing workforce, which was sometime in 1944, my grandmother was riding on a bus. This was in Lynn, Massachusetts. And Lynn was a factory town, and my grandmother was riding on a bus. And there were 2 women sitting in the seat in front of her. And she overheard them talking, and they were saying, "Oh, this is great. I'm getting so many hours in the factory, and I'm making so much money. I hope the war goes on for a long time." And my grandmother got up out of her seat, and she smacked them with her purse. And the bus driver stopped the bus because there's this ruckus going on in the back of the bus. And I'm sure she didn't do it quietly. There was this ruckus going on in the back of the bus. The bus driver stopped the bus, called the police. My grandmother was arrested.
Wow.
And a couple of weeks later, went to court. And the judge said, "Now, Mrs. Kaloust, can you tell me what happened?" And she told the story. And she said, "I was riding on the bus, and these 2 women said that they hoped the war went on for a long time. I have 5 sons in the military. I don't know where any of them are. And for somebody to say they hope the war goes on for a long time, I couldn't take it. I smacked them, and I'd do it again." And the judge said, "Case dismissed. I'm taking the Kaloust to lunch."
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty good.
That's good.
When I started thinking about Memorial Day the other day, it was like whole families used to sacrifice. It wasn't just a soldier who went and gave his life or her life. It wasn't just that. Whole families, whole communities sacrificed. And that doesn't happen anymore. Ever since, the Vietnam War was distant, even though there was a draft and a lot of people went off that didn't necessarily want to, it was fairly small compared to World War II. And the country as a whole didn't make this big sacrifice. And then the wars after that were, it's like, what are we even doing there? And,
that's one of the hard things is that, it sounds like in World War II that there was a lot of agreement or solidarity. And it's in Vietnam War, which I'm more aware of than you too, being teenagers at that time, there was a lot of loss, a lot of touching families, and it was mostly, I think, if not all males, just suddenly being ripped out of homes and thrown into the army or the military because of the draft. But we weren't all united for the war, for doing whatever needed to be done to protect the name of our country and the safety of our country. And so there was so much diverse and conflicting stances. And I think now is the same thing or similar in the sense that the current war is impacting people's ability to buy gas and be able to afford that, and farmers getting the fertilizer they need to keep their farm afloat and get food to people. And then the food prices are going up. So this war, these times are impacting people. But like you said, sometimes people don't even know why are the prices going up or what is happening that is making these challenges for people. So there's, I think, a lot of people that are angry about the price of things, the lack of things, but it isn't like any kind of solidarity or single-minded focus.
There's no metal drives going on so that we have enough metal to build ships with. There's no, none of that stuff. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I would like to say in closing here that in my opinion, the best way we can honor all the people who have given their lives one way or another in war and battles, the best way we can honor their memory is to stop doing that. Let's just stop doing it.
Mhm.
There's
Yes.
no reason for it anymore. Let's just stop. There never really was, but let's just stop doing it.
Mhm.
That's my Memorial Day prayer.
Amen. And my closing remarks, I want to say that as I was looking up some of the writing about Memorial Day, I was reading that at this time, often Memorial Day in general is a day for reflection, gratitude, and remembrance for those who have given their lives in the service to our country. And I was really struck by those first three words, reflection, gratitude, and remembrance, because I feel like that is such an oldish focus. You could look at Memorial Day as an opportunity just to, as an oldish person, just to reflect, to have gratitude in our lives and what's happened, what might be ahead, and remembrance for those specifics, like the story you just shared, and all the things that make us each who we are at this moment.
Yes.
So happy Memorial Day, Greg.
Happy Memorial Day, Janet. And Janet and I are not at war, folks. So there you go.
Yes. So we can rise to do this again, hopefully.
Yeah. What were those three things again that we're supposed to be doing? I forgot.
Reflection, gratitude, and remembrance.
Okay. And that's what we're doing here on Oldish, that's for sure, on a regular basis. And it seems like that is the Oldish hobby plus pickleball.
Yes. Yep. I don't know why they didn't include that in the write-up, but
I don't know. Okay. Well, happy reflective Memorial Day, everybody.
here, here.
Yes. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Greg.
That's it for now. Thanks for listening. Memorial Day, like everything else, changes in meaning over time. Try to spend some of your day in reflection, gratitude, and remembrance. And don't forget to love everybody. You can leave comments or requests for topics or guests on this or other episodes at www.oldish.me. There's a link there too if you've wondered how you can help support our podcast. If you like what you heard today, please tell a friend and rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Cattle